While Nazi forces rampaged across Europe, the Japanese military conquered an empire in Asia and the Pacific. Each set out to build a new order in the occupied lands. Hitler's new order grew out of his racial obsessions. As his forces conquered most of Europe, Hitler set up puppet governments in Western European countries that were peopled by Aryans, or light-skinned Europeans, whom Hitler and his followers believed to be a master race. The Slavs of Eastern Europe were considered to be an inferior race. They were shoved aside to provide more living space for Germans, the strongest of the Aryans. To the Nazis, occupied lands were an economic resource to be plundered and looted. The Nazis systematically stripped conquered nations of their works of art, factories, and other resources. To counter resistance movements that emerged in occupied countries, the Nazis took savage revenge, shooting hostages and torturing prisoners. But the Nazis' most sinister plans centered on the people of the occupied countries. During the 1930s, the Nazis had sent thousands of Jewish people and political opponents to concentration camps, detention centers for civilians considered enemies of the state. Over the course of the war, the Nazis forced these people, along with millions of Polish and Soviet Slavs and people from other parts of Europe, to work as slave laborers. Prisoners were poorly fed and often worked to death. At the same time, Hitler pursued a vicious program to kill all people he judged racially inferior, particularly Europe's Jews. The Nazis also targeted other groups who did not meet the Aryan racial ideal, including Slavs, Gypsies, homosexuals, and the disabled. Political and religious leaders who spoke out against Nazism also suffered abuse. Starting in 1939, the Nazis forced Jews in Poland and other countries to live in ghettos, or sections of cities where Jewish people were confined. Many died from starvation, disease, overwork, and the harsh elements. By 1941, however, German leaders had devised plans for the final solution of the Jewish problem, the genocide of all European Jews. To accomplish this goal, Hitler had 6 special death camps built in Poland. The Nazis shipped undesirables from all over occupied Europe camps there. To accomplish this goal, Hitler had 6 special death camps built in Poland. The Nazis shipped undesirables from all over occupied Europe to these camps. There, Nazi engineers designed the most efficient means of killing millions of men, women, and children. As the prisoners reached the camps, they were stripped of their clothes and valuables. Their heads were shaved. Guards separated men from women and children from their parents. The young, elderly, and sick were targeted for immediate killing. Within a few days, they were herded into shower rooms and gassed. The Nazis worked others to death or used them for perverse medical experiments. By 1945, the Nazis had massacred some 6 million Jews in what became known as the Holocaust. Nearly 6 million other people were killed as well. Jewish people resisted the Nazis even though they knew their efforts could not succeed. In July 1942, the Nazis began sending Polish Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto to the Treblinka death camp at a rate of about 5,000 per day. In the spring of 1943, knowing that their situation was hopeless, the Jews took over the ghetto and used a small collection of guns and homemade bombs to damage the Nazi forces as much as possible. On May 16th, the Nazis regained control of the ghetto and eliminated the remaining Warsaw Jews. Still, their courage has inspired many over the years. In some cases, friends, neighbors, or strangers protected Jews. Italian peasants hid Jews in their villages. Denmark and Bulgaria saved almost all their Jewish populations. Many people, however, pretended not to notice what was happening. Some even became collaborators and cooperated with the Nazis. In France, the Vichy government helped ship thousands of Jewish people to their deaths. Strict immigration policies in many Western countries, as well as a conscious effort to block Jewish immigration, prevented many Jews from gaining refuge elsewhere. The scale and savagery of the Holocaust are unequaled in history. The Nazis deliberately set out to destroy Jews for no other reason than their religious and ethnic heritage. Today, the record of that slaughter is a vivid reminder of the monstrous results of racism and intolerance. Meanwhile, Japanese forces took control across Asia and the Pacific. Their self-proclaimed mission was to help Asians escape Western colonial rule. In fact, the real goal was a Japanese empire in Asia. The Japanese invaders treated the Chinese, Filipinos, Malaysians, and other conquered people with great brutality, killing and torturing civilians throughout East and Southeast Asia. The occupiers seized food, crops, destroyed cities and towns, and made local people into slave laborers. Whatever welcome the Japanese had first met as liberators was soon turned to hatred. In the Philippines, Indochina, and elsewhere, nationalist groups waged guerrilla warfare against the Japanese invaders.